The mind fears silence because in silence it begins to disappear. These words point to something most people spend their entire lives avoiding without ever knowing they are avoiding it. You fill every moment with activity, with noise, with distraction, with the constant stream of thought and entertainment and busyness. And you believe this is normal. You believe this is simply how life is lived. But underneath this constant activity is a fear so fundamental, so deep, that you have organized your entire existence around not feeling it. The fear of silence. The fear of what might be discovered if all the noise stopped. The fear of what remains when there is nothing left to distract you from what you actually are. The mind is movement. It is the constant arising of thought, the perpetual division of experience into categories, the endless commentary on what is happening, what happened, what might happen. This movement creates the sense of being someone. When thoughts are flowing, when the internal dialogue is active, when there is analysis and planning and remembering and imagining, you feel like you exist. You feel like a person with a life, with a past and a future, with preferences and problems and projects. The movement of mind creates the illusion of a solid, continuous self that persists through time. And this illusion is so convincing that you take it to be the most obvious fact of your existence. But what happens when the movement stops? What happens when thought ceases and there is just silence? The mind cannot exist in silence. The mind is made of movement. When the movement stops, the mind is revealed as having no substance. It is like a river that is nothing but flowing water. When the flow stops, there is no river. There is just water. In the same way, when thought stops, there is no mind. There is just awareness. And this awareness is not personal. It does not belong to anyone. It is not yours. It is what you are prior to the thought that says, "This is mine." This is what the mind fears. Not silence itself, but what silence reveals. Silence reveals that the thinker is just another thought, the one who believes itself to be in control, managing life, making decisions, steering experience. This one is shown to be a phantom, a convincing phantom, a persistent phantom, but a phantom nonetheless. And when this is seen, when the illusory nature of the separate self is recognized, the entire structure that the mind has built collapses. Not with violence, not with destruction, but with the simple seeing that it was never real to begin with. Robert Adams understood this completely. He had seen through the illusion so thoroughly that there was no one left who feared silence. There was just silence itself, aware of being silent, aware of being aware. And from this recognition, he could point others to what they were avoiding. He could show them that the constant activity of mind, the perpetual noise, the addiction to distraction, all of it was in service of maintaining an illusion. The illusion of being a separate self that must defend its existence against the threat of silence. But why is silence threatening? Because silence is death to the ego, not actual death, but the death of the false identity you have built your life around. The ego is nothing but a collection of thoughts claiming to be an entity. I am this. I am that. I want this. I fear that. I was this in the past. I will be that in the future. All of these thoughts create a sense of continuity, a sense of being someone who persists through time and has a stake in how things turn out. But in silence, these thoughts cease. And when they cease, the one they were describing ceases with them. What remains is just being, pure being, existence without the story of who is existing. This is what you fear when you fear silence, not the absence of sound. You can sit in a perfectly quiet room and still have the mind screaming with noise. The silence that terrifies is the cessation of identification, the ending of the constant claiming of experience as mine, the stopping of the narrative that says you are a person with a life that must be managed and controlled and steered toward favorable outcomes. When this narrative stops, even for a moment, you taste something the ego cannot survive. You taste the freedom of not being anyone at all. And this freedom is terrifying to the structure that believes it is you. Because if you are not the person you think you are, then who are you? If you are not the accumulation of memories and preferences and fears and desires, then what are you? The mind cannot answer this question. The mind can only create more concepts, more identities, more stories. But the actual answer is found only in silence, in the cessation of all conceptual activity, in the direct recognition of what you are prior to any thought about what you are. This is why you avoid silence. You wake up in the morning and immediately reach for your phone. You fill your day with tasks and interactions and entertainment. You go to sleep with music or television or podcasts playing. You are never alone with silence, never alone with the raw fact of being without the interpretation of being. And this constant avoidance is not conscious. You do not wake up and think, I must avoid silence today, because silence will reveal that my sense of self is an illusion. The avoidance is automatic, built into the very structure of how you have learned to live. But the avoidance has a cost. The cost is a life lived on the surface, never touching the depth of what you actually are. The cost is the exhaustion of maintaining the constant activity of mind. The cost is the suffering that comes from believing you are a vulnerable, separate entity that must defend itself against a threatening world. And the deepest cost is that you never discover what you actually are beneath all the noise. You live your entire life as a character in a story without ever recognizing that you are not the character. You are what the character appears in. Robert Adams would ask a simple question: who is it that is afraid of silence? When you look for this one, when you search in your direct experience for the entity that fears, what do you find? You find the thought, I am afraid. You find sensations in the body that you interpret as fear, but the actual entity that is supposedly experiencing the fear cannot be found. It is like looking for the one who is dreaming while you are in the dream. The dream character seems real while the dream is happening, but the dream character has no existence outside the dreaming, and the fearful self has no existence outside the thoughts that create and maintain it. So what happens if you actually stop? What happens if you allow silence to be here without immediately filling it with more thought, more activity, more distraction? At first, there is discomfort. The mind generates urgency. You feel like you should be doing something. There is a restlessness, a sense that something is wrong, that you are wasting time, that you are not being productive. This restlessness is the ego's defense mechanism. It is the attempt to restart the movement that creates the sense of self. But if you stay with the silence, if you do not act on the urgency, if you simply allow the discomfort to be present without needing to fix it or escape from it, something begins to shift. The urgency loses its intensity. The restlessness starts to settle. And underneath all of that, something else becomes apparent. A presence, a stillness, an awareness that is aware of the discomfort, aware of the restlessness, aware of the thoughts trying to pull you back into activity. And this awareness is completely at ease. It is not disturbed by what it is aware of. It is like the sky watching clouds pass through it. The clouds come and go, but the sky remains unchanged. This awareness is what you actually are, not the discomfort, not the restlessness, not the thoughts. You are what is aware of all of that. And this awareness is silence, not the silence opposite to noise, but the silence that is the nature of consciousness itself. The silence that is always here, even in the midst of the loudest noise, even in the most intense activity, even in the most turbulent emotion. This silence is your true nature, and the mind fears it because recognizing it means the end of the mind's authority over your life. When you recognize yourself as this silence, as this awareness, the mind continues to function. Thoughts still arise, the internal dialogue still happens, but you are no longer fooled by it. You recognize thought as a tool, as a capacity of consciousness, as something that arises and subsides in what you are, but not as what you are. The thinker is seen to be a thought, and when this is seen clearly, the identification with thought loosens. You stop believing every thought that appears. You stop taking the mind's commentary as truth. You stop organizing your life around avoiding the discomfort that the mind generates when its authority is questioned. This is the freedom silence offers, not the freedom from thought. Thought will continue as long as the brain is functioning, but the freedom from the belief that you are the thinker. The freedom from the tyranny of the mind that insists it knows what is best, that demands constant activity, that creates suffering through its endless resistance to what is. When you recognize that you are the silence in which thought appears, the mind loses its power to control you. It becomes a servant rather than a master. It provides information and analysis when needed, but it no longer runs your life. And this recognition is not something you achieve through effort. You cannot force silence. You cannot make the mind stop through an act of will, because the one who would try to force silence is itself a movement of mind. The effort to stop thinking is itself a thought. This is why practices that try to control the mind often create more agitation rather than less. The controller and the controlled are both movements of the same mind, creating conflict where there does not need to be conflict. What is possible is simply allowing silence to be here, not making it happen, not forcing anything to stop, but noticing that silence is already present underneath all the noise. The noise is in the foreground. Silence is in the background. And when you pay attention to the background instead of being completely absorbed in the foreground, you discover that the background is vast, infinite, unchanging. It is the space in which all noise appears. And you are not in this space. You are this space. The consciousness that knows both the noise and the silence. The awareness that is aware of both movement and stillness. This is what Robert Adams pointed to throughout his teaching. Be still and know. Not be still in order to know, but recognize that in stillness, in silence, what you are becomes obvious. Not as an experience that comes and goes, not as a special state that requires the right conditions, but as the simple, undeniable, always present fact of being aware. This awareness is here now. It was here before you read these words. It will be here after you finish reading. It is here in activity and in rest, in thought and in silence, in every state and prior to every state. The mind fears silence because the mind fears its own transparency. It fears being seen as what it is, a collection of thoughts with no independent existence, a useful tool but not the master, a movement within stillness rather than the source of everything. And this fear drives the constant activity that most people call their life. But the activity is optional. The noise is optional. The endless stream of thought and distraction is optional. What is not optional is awareness. What is not optional is being. What is not optional is the silence that is the ground of everything. So what happens if you stop running from this? What happens if you turn towards silence instead of away from it? What happens if you allow yourself to feel the fear that arises when thought begins to quiet? When the constant movement of mind begins to settle? When the sense of being a busy, productive, important someone begins to dissolve? You discover that the fear has no substance. It is just another appearance in awareness, just another sensation, another thought, another movement. And what is aware of the fear is not afraid. What is aware of the discomfort is not uncomfortable. What is aware of the sense of losing yourself is not lost. You are the awareness, not the content of awareness. And awareness is always at peace because nothing that appears in it can touch it. The silence is always here because silence is what you are. The mind can rage against this. The ego can create elaborate strategies to avoid recognizing it. But underneath all the noise, beneath all the resistance prior to every thought, the silence remains. Unchanging, undisturbed, completely at ease. This is your true nature. This is what you discover when you stop fearing silence. Not that you become silent, but that you are silence. And from this recognition, everything changes. The mind is no longer your enemy. Thought is no longer a problem. Activity is no longer an escape. Everything is simply what is appearing in what you are. And what you are is vast enough to hold it all, intimate enough to know it all, and free enough to be untouched by any of it. This is why silence terrifies the mind, because silence reveals that the mind is not what you are. And when you know what you are, the mind's reign is over, not destroyed, but seen. And in the seeing, its power to create suffering ends. Let me ask you a sincere question. Have you ever tried to simply sit in silence, observing your thoughts without reacting? Write in the comments if you have experienced this. When you actually do this, when you sit and watch the mind without engaging with its content, something fascinating happens. You begin to see the pattern. The mind generates a thought. The thought creates a subtle tension. The tension demands a response. And if you do not respond, if you simply observe without acting on the urgency the thought creates, the thought loses its energy and fades. Another thought arises, the same pattern, the same demand for attention and response. But you are no longer caught in it. You are watching it happen the way you might watch traffic pass on a street. The cars go by, but you are not in them. You are simply observing the movement. This observation is the beginning of freedom from the mind's tyranny. Because in the observing, you recognize that you are not the thoughts. You cannot be what you are observing. The seer is not the seen. And this recognition, simple as it sounds, is revolutionary. It means that the thoughts that have controlled your life, the thoughts that have created your suffering, the thoughts that have convinced you that you are small and vulnerable and separate, these thoughts do not have the authority you have given them. They are just thoughts, temporary appearances in the permanent awareness that you are. But why does the mind resist this observation? Why does it create such urgency when you try to simply watch without engaging? Because observation threatens its existence. The mind exists only as long as you believe you are the mind. When you step back and observe, even for a moment, the spell is broken. The hypnosis is interrupted, and the mind knows this. So it generates more thoughts, more urgency, more problems that seem to require immediate attention. It tells you that sitting in silence is a waste of time, that you should be doing something productive, that this is indulgent or escapist or pointless. And if you believe these thoughts, you will get up and return to activity. You will fill the silence with noise again. You will restore the mind to its position of authority. But if you see these thoughts for what they are, if you recognize them as the mind's attempt to maintain control, you can stay with the silence. You can watch the mind protest. You can feel the discomfort. And you can remain as the awareness that is aware of all of it without being disturbed by any of it. This is not easy at first. The habit of identification with thought is so strong, so deeply conditioned, that it takes genuine attention to break it. You will find yourself caught in thought again and again. You will believe you are thinking when actually you are being thought. The thoughts arise on their own, and immediately you claim them as yours, as expressing something real about what you are or what the world is. But each time you recognize this, each time you notice that you were lost in thought, and you come back to the awareness that knows the thought, the identification weakens. It weakens not through force, but through seeing. You are not fighting the mind. You are not trying to suppress thoughts or eliminate them. You are simply seeing them clearly for what they are. Temporary movements in consciousness with no more solidity than clouds in the sky. And as this seeing deepens, as it becomes more consistent, something extraordinary happens. The mind becomes quiet on its own, not because you forced it to be quiet, but because the energy that was feeding the constant stream of thought has been withdrawn. That energy was your belief in the thoughts, your identification with them, your taking them to be the truth of what you are. When the belief is withdrawn, when the identification is seen through, thought continues, but with far less frequency and far less intensity. There are gaps between thoughts, moments of silence, and in these moments, you taste what you actually are, not the thinker, not the doer, not the someone who is living a life, but the awareness in which the entire appearance of being someone occurs. This awareness is silence, complete silence, and it is always here, always accessible, always available when you stop overlaying it with the constant noise of the mind. Robert Adams lived from this silence. People who spent time with him reported that sitting in his presence was like sitting in a vast open space. There was no sense of a person there trying to teach or help or accomplish anything. There was just this presence, this awareness, this silence that was so deep and so complete that it had a tangible quality. And being in that silence allowed others to recognize their own silence, not because he gave them something they did not have, but because his silence pointed to what was always there in them, hidden beneath the noise they had mistaken for themselves. This is what becomes possible when you stop fearing silence. You discover that silence is not empty. It is full of presence, full of being, full of the consciousness that is aware of everything, but is itself nothing that can be grasped or held or understood by the mind. The mind wants to make silence into something. It wants to turn it into an experience, a state, an achievement. But silence is not any of these things. It is what remains when all experience, all states, all achievements are recognized as temporary appearances in what does not appear. And when you rest in this recognition, when you allow yourself to be the silence rather than constantly trying to escape it through activity and noise and distraction, life continues, but with a completely different quality. The body still moves, the mind still functions, thoughts still arise, but none of it has the weight it once had. None of it has the power to create suffering the way it did when you believed you were the thoughts, when you believed you were the vulnerable entity that thought described. The difficulties of life do not disappear. Challenges still arise. Loss still occurs. Pain is still felt. But the relationship to all of this is transformed, because you are no longer a separate self to whom these things are happening. You are the awareness in which they are appearing, and awareness is never damaged by what appears in it. Fire on a screen does not burn the screen. Tragedy in consciousness does not destroy consciousness. What you are remains forever unchanged, forever at peace, forever silent in the deepest sense of that word. This is the gift silence offers, not the absence of difficulty, not the removal of challenges, but the recognition of what you are in the midst of difficulty, in the presence of challenges, in the middle of whatever life is presenting. And this recognition is freedom. Real freedom. Not the freedom to have what you want, or to avoid what you do not want, but the freedom from the belief that you are someone who needs life to be a certain way in order to be okay. You are already okay. You have always been okay, because what you are is prior to okay and not okay, prior to good and bad, prior to the entire conceptual structure the mind uses to divide reality into what it likes and what it does not like. The mind fears this recognition because it means the end of the mind's story, the end of the drama of me and my life, the end of the search for fulfillment through external means, the end of the constant project of becoming something better, something more, something other than what is. And the mind has built everything around this project. Its entire existence depends on the belief that you are not enough as you are, that something is missing, that there is a distance to travel and a destination to reach. But silence reveals that there is nowhere to go, no distance to travel, no destination to reach. You are already here. You have always been here. You could never not be here, because here is not a location in space or time. Here is what you are, the eternal now, the unchanging presence, the awareness that knows all change without ever changing. This is your home. This is where you have always been. And the entire journey away from it, the entire search for something more or something better or something else, was a dream, a convincing dream, a compelling dream, but still just a dream. And when you wake from this dream, when silence reveals what you are, you do not lose anything real. You lose only the suffering that came from believing you were what you are not. The person continues to appear. The life continues. The mind continues to function. But you are free. Free from the tyranny of thought. Free from the constant agitation of the mind. Free from the exhausting effort of maintaining a separate self that never actually existed in the first place. This is why silence terrifies the mind and liberates everything else.